I never expected a dusty cardboard box to change everything I thought I knew about my mom. One moment, I was just cleaning the attic. The next, I was holding a tape that had her handwriting on it, dated 3 weeks before she died. My hands shook as I read the label. She'd never mentioned making anything like this. In that instant, the silence around me felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. My heart pounded, torn between wanting to know the truth and fearing what I'd hear. That's when I realized some messages aren't meant to be found by accident. They're meant to find you. It started on a late October afternoon, when the light outside was dimming earlier than usual and the air had that crisp bite that always reminded me of childhood. I'd returned to my parents' old house after nearly 8 years. Dad had decided to finally sell it. Too many empty rooms, too many memories. So it was up to me to help clear out what was left behind. I climbed the narrow wooden stairs to the attic, flashlight in hand. The smell of old wood and forgotten Christmas decorations hit me like a wave. I hadn't been up there since I was 13. Back then, Mom used to bring up boxes of holiday lights while humming old songs. Now it was just me, the creak of the floorboards, and a quiet that felt almost alive. I started sorting through boxes, old clothes, books, photo albums. Some things made me smile, others hit harder than expected. She had passed away when I was 19. It had been sudden, and I never got a real chance to say goodbye. I'd spent years pretending I'd moved on, but every corner of this house had her fingerprints. Then, tucked beneath a stack of yellowed newspapers, I noticed a small shoebox wrapped in faded floral paper. It was strange, everything else was labeled, but this one wasn't. My pulse quickened. I gently peeled off the brittle paper, opened the lid, and froze. Inside was a single VHS tape. On its label, in her handwriting, were the words, "For when you're ready." I stared at it, confused. There was no date except for the faint ink in the corner, March 12th. That was 3 weeks before she died. My throat tightened. For a second, I just sat there on the attic floor, tape in my lap, unable to move. Dad never mentioned anything about this. Neither did Aunt May, who helped clean up after she passed. It felt like I'd stumbled onto a secret that had been waiting in the dark all these years. I carried the tape downstairs like it was something fragile, precious. In the living room, I found the old VCR still hooked up to the TV. It hadn't been touched in years, but somehow it still worked. As I slid the tape in, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The screen flickered. For a moment, it was just static. And then, there she was. My mom, sitting in her favorite chair by the kitchen window, light streaming in behind her. She looked tired but peaceful. She smiled softly at the camera. "Hey, sweetheart," she began, her voice calm, familiar, and suddenly unbearably real. "If you're watching this, it means you're ready." I gasped, my hands covering my mouth. It felt like she was talking to me now, not years ago. "I don't know how much time I have left," she continued. "And there are things you deserve to know. About me. About us. And about something I never told you." The tape crackled slightly, but her eyes never wavered. I leaned closer to the screen, tears already forming. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "It's time you learn the truth about the attic." The tape cut to black. For a few seconds, I just sat there staring at the black screen, my heart racing like I'd stepped off a ledge. The silence in the room felt different now. Heavier. It was as if the house itself knew what I'd just heard. I rewound the tape, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. Her voice echoed again, soft, steady, but layered with something I'd never noticed in her before. A kind of weight. "It's time you learn the truth about the attic." When the tape cut out again, I exhaled shakily, realizing I'd been holding my breath. The old VCR word, like it too, was exhausted by the secret it had just delivered. I wanted to call Dad immediately, but something stopped me. He'd moved to Florida 2 years after Mom passed, and even though we talked occasionally, there was still this unspoken distance between us. He'd always said the attic was just old junk, nothing worth worrying about. So why would Mom record something like this? I ejected the tape, holding it in both hands as if it might crumble. Every memory of her suddenly felt sharper. I could see her moving through the house, humming under her breath, pausing sometimes to look at the attic door like she was listening for something. Back then, I thought it was just one of her quirks. Now, it felt like a clue I'd missed. I climbed the attic stairs again that night, this time with my phone flashlight on full. The house was completely silent. The kind of quiet where even the sound of your own breathing feels too loud. As I stepped onto the attic floorboards, I scanned every corner more carefully. Boxes. Old furniture. Dust. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then I noticed something I hadn't earlier. The far wall, behind an old dresser, had a section of paneling that looked newer than the rest. The wood wasn't as faded, and the nails were different. My heart skipped a beat. Slowly, I pushed the dresser aside, wincing as it scraped across the floor. Up close, I saw it clearly. A rectangular panel had been screwed into the wall, almost like a makeshift door. I ran my fingers along the edges. It wasn't part of the original structure. Someone had put it there deliberately. Mom. I crouched down and tugged at the screws with my fingers, but they were in tight. I ran downstairs, grabbed an old screwdriver from the junk drawer, and rushed back up. My hands were trembling so hard I nearly dropped it. One by one, I loosened the screws, my breath quickening with each turn. When the last screw came out, I pulled the panel forward and felt a gust of colder air hit my face. Behind it was a small hidden space, not big enough to stand in, but clearly used to store something important. My flashlight beam caught the edge of a wooden box. It wasn't just any box. It was carved with delicate patterns I recognized instantly. Mom used to make those designs on everything, her jewelry boxes, even the kitchen drawers. It was her signature. My throat tightened as I pulled it out. The box was heavier than I expected. I sat cross-legged on the floor, heart thudding, and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were neatly arranged items, a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon, a faded photograph of a young woman I didn't recognize, a small velvet pouch, and another VHS tape. This one was labeled simply, Part 2. I stared at it stunned. She'd planned this. She'd hidden these tapes on purpose, waiting for me to find them when I was ready. I clutched the box to my chest, overwhelmed. Questions flooded my mind. Who was the woman in the photo? What was she trying to tell me? Why the attic? I carried everything downstairs and placed the new tape into the VCR, my hands shaking even more than before. The screen flickered again, and Mom appeared, this time sitting outside, wrapped in a cardigan, wind blowing through her hair. "If you're still watching," she said, a faint smile on her lips, "then you found the box." I gasped. "There are things in there that you won't understand right away. And that's okay," she continued. "This story isn't simple. It's about who I was before I became your mom. It's about a part of my life I never talked about because I didn't know how." Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and I instinctively leaned forward as if I could comfort her through the screen. She held up the same photograph I'd found in the box. "This was taken in 1985, she said softly. "Long before you were born. Before I met your father. Before everything changed." She looked down for a moment, then back up. Her eyes were shimmering. "I need you to listen closely," she whispered. The tape suddenly cut to static again. I jumped up, hitting the side of the VCR, trying to get it back. But it wouldn't play. The screen stayed gray and buzzing. My frustration turned into panic. I yanked the tape out, praying it wasn't damaged. As I held it in my hands, I noticed something I'd missed earlier, a small note taped to the bottom of the cassette. In her handwriting, "If it stops, you're close. Go back to where it began." My hands trembled as I stared at the words. Go back to where it began. I looked up slowly at the attic door. I stood at the bottom of the attic stairs, clutching the tape in my hand. The note on it felt like a riddle, her handwriting looping softly, just like the way she used to write my birthday cards. Go back to where it began. My mind raced, trying to figure out what she meant. Where it began. For her? For us? For the house? I climbed the steps again, slower this time, my flashlight beam tracing along the rafters and beams like I was searching for something buried inside the walls. The attic had always been a place of stored memories, but now it felt like a map, and she was leading me somewhere. I scanned the space carefully. Old trunks. A few picture frames leaning against the wall. an ancient rocking chair that creaked every time the wind hit the house. Then my eyes landed on a small square section in the far corner of the floorboards. It was slightly darker than the rest, as if it had been pried open and replaced at some point. Kneeling down, I ran my fingers along the edges. Sure enough, there was a faint gap, just big enough to wedge my nails into. I lifted carefully, and the panel came loose with a soft groan. Beneath it was a shallow compartment wrapped in plastic. My heart pounded as I pulled it out. Inside was another box, this one smaller and older. The hinges creaked when I opened it. A wave of cold air hit my face. Inside were a few more items, a folded letter, a tarnished bracelet, a tiny key, and a cassette tape labeled Audio 1. Not VHS. Cassette. I stared at it in disbelief. Who even had a cassette player anymore? Then I remembered. Down in the basement, tucked behind the old tool cabinet, there was a dusty tape recorder my dad used to record music on when I was a kid. I hadn't thought about it in years. I hurried downstairs, nearly tripping over the last step in my rush. The basement light buzzed faintly as I flicked it on. Everything smelled of old concrete and metal. Sure enough, the tape recorder was still there, under a pile of junk. I brushed off the dust, popped in the cassette, and hit play. The tape crackled, then her voice filled the room. Not her calm, prepared voice like on the VHS tapes. This one sounded younger. Uncertain. "If you're listening to this," she began, her breath shaky, "it means I finally decided to tell you the truth. I don't know how else to do it, except like this. Talking to the future." I leaned closer, every word sinking deep. "I wasn't always the person you knew," she continued. "Before you were born, before I met your father, I had another life. One I buried because it hurt too much to keep alive." The tape clicked softly as if she paused to collect herself. "I grew up in this house too," she said. "And the attic, that was my hiding place. When things got bad, that's where I'd go. It was the only place that felt safe. But one summer, something happened up there. Something I couldn't tell anyone. Not even your father." I felt a chill run down my spine. Her voice was so raw, so unlike any version of her I'd known. "There was someone," she whispered. "Someone I trusted. Someone who changed everything. I need you to understand what really happened before you judge me for the choices I made." The tape clicked off abruptly. I tapped the recorder, rewound, pressed play again. Same ending. It had been cut short. I sat back against the wall, my hands trembling. Another life. A hidden past in the same house I grew up in. The attic wasn't just a storage space to her. It was a witness. I picked up the small key from the box, turning it in my fingers. It looked old, maybe from a jewelry box or a diary. I remembered how she used to keep a wooden chest near her sewing table upstairs. I raced back to the attic. Sure enough, buried under a pile of old fabric, I found it, the small wooden chest with a delicate lock on the front. My hands shook as I slid the key in. It turned with a soft click. Inside were more letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to someone named Eleanor. The handwriting wasn't hers, though. It was someone else's. I pulled one out carefully. The paper was fragile, yellowed at the edges. The first line made my breath catch. "My dearest Claire, if anyone ever finds these letters, it means the past has finally come knocking. Claire." My mom. I stared at the letter, the words swimming in front of my eyes. Who is Eleanor? And why were these letters hidden here, waiting for me decades later? I glanced toward the attic window. The wind howled outside, rattling the glass. Suddenly, this house didn't just hold memories. It held secrets. And for the first time, I understood. I wasn't just unpacking boxes. I was unraveling a life I never knew existed. The name on the letter lingered in my mind like an echo I couldn't quiet. Eleanor. I'd never heard my mom mention anyone by that name. Not in bedtime stories, not in family conversations, not even in passing. It felt like I'd stumbled onto a chapter of her life that had been deliberately erased. I held the letter up to the light, careful not to tear the fragile paper. The handwriting was elegant, the kind that belongs to someone who took their time with every word. I started reading. "My dearest Claire, if anyone ever finds these letters, it means the past has finally come knocking." I can't change what happened, but I hope one day you'll forgive me for the part one played. The rest of the letter was filled with fragments, memories of nights spent in the attic, promises whispered between two people hiding from the world, and a single line that made my stomach tighten. What we buried up there isn't just ours anymore. I lowered the letter slowly, my hands cold despite the warm attic air. This wasn't just some long-lost friendship. There was something buried. Literally or not, I couldn't tell yet. I sifted through more letters. Each was dated between 1984 and 1986. All addressed to my mom. All signed the same way, with love, Eleanor. Some spoke about secret meetings. Others hinted at my mom being afraid of someone. But none explained who Eleanor really was. Then, tucked between two envelopes, I found a Polaroid. My heart jumped. It was my mom, maybe in her early 20s, smiling brightly beside a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. On the back, written faintly in pencil, "Me and E, summer '85. I stared at that photo for a long time. Mom looked happy. Not just happy-free. I'd never seen that expression on her in any family album. I needed answers. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Aunt May. She'd been my mom's closest confidant growing up, and if anyone knew about Eleanor, it was her. "Hey, honey," she answered, her voice warm as always. "How's the cleanup going?" "Slow," I replied, trying to steady my breathing. "Aunt May, did Mom ever have a friend named Eleanor?" There was a long silence on the other end. "Aunt May," I pressed. "I haven't heard that name in a long time," she finally said. Her tone had changed. Softer. Uneasy. "So you do know her?" "Yes," she sighed. "But that's complicated. Why are you asking?" I explained about the tapes, the box, the letters in the attic. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "Sweetheart," she said carefully, "your mom and Eleanor were very close. But something happened between them. Something your mom never talked about again after '86. She shut that door and never reopened it." "What happened?" I asked. Another pause. "I think it's time you saw for yourself. There's something in my house. Your mom left it with me years ago. I promised not to give it to anyone until the time was right. Maybe this is it." My pulse quickened. "I can drive over tonight." "No," she said firmly. "Come in the morning. It's too late, and I don't want you driving in the dark with that old road. This isn't something to rush." After we hung up, I sat in the attic for a long time, the letters spread out around me like puzzle pieces. My mom's younger voice from the cassette still echoed in my mind. The way she'd said something happened up there replayed like a loop I couldn't escape. I carefully gathered everything, returned the floorboard panel to its place, and brought the box downstairs with me. I kept the Polaroid in my pocket, unable to let it go. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house made me think about hidden spaces and unsent messages. I kept picturing the two women in the photo, young, fearless, hiding something in plain sight. When the first light of morning crept through the blinds, I grabbed my jacket, the box, and the Polaroid. Aunt May's house was only 40 minutes away, but the drive felt longer. The closer I got, the heavier the air seemed. She was waiting for me on the porch, arms folded, eyes soft but cautious. "You really found the attic box," she said quietly. I nodded. "Then," she said, turning toward the house, "I guess it's time you heard the whole story." Aunt May led me through her house to a small study tucked away behind the kitchen. The walls were lined with bookshelves, they were darkened by age and memories. A single framed photo of my mom sat on a shelf, younger, radiant, laughing mid-moment as if frozen in a secret only she and the camera shared. Aunt May opened a drawer and carefully pulled out a slim wooden box. Its surface was scratched, the hinges old but polished. She held it like it was something fragile, something that carried weight far beyond its size. "Your mom gave me this the night she left Eleanor," she said quietly. "She was shaking when she handed it to me. Told me to keep it safe, and to never give it to anyone until the time was right." I swallowed hard. "What's inside?" She met my eyes. "Why don't you find out?" I sat at her old oak desk and slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, a single VHS tape with June 12th, 1986 scrawled in black marker, and a delicate silver locket shaped like a teardrop. The letters smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. I untied the ribbon and began to read the top one. Claire, if you're reading this, then you've found the truth I could never say out loud. I loved Eleanor. She was my anchor when everything else fell apart. But love like ours wasn't meant to be simple. Not then. My hands trembled as I read the words again. Loved. She loved her. All those years of silence, the unexplained sadness in my mom's eyes, the way she'd stare at old photographs when she thought no one was looking, it all started to make sense. The letter went on to describe nights spent sneaking away from town, weekends at a small cabin by the lake, whispered plans about a future they both knew was impossible in the world they lived in. My mom had always seemed like someone carrying invisible weight. Now I could see where it began. Aunt May sat in the corner quietly, watching my face as I read. When I reached the end of the letter, she spoke softly. She was terrified back then. Being with Eleanor wasn't accepted. People were cruel. Your mom's parents, they found out. Things turned ugly fast. I picked up the VHS tape, my heart racing. What's on this? Aunt May hesitated. That is the night everything changed. Your mom gave it to me after she left. She couldn't bring herself to watch it again. We dusted off an old VCR player she kept in the living room. I slid the tape in and sat back on the couch, knees drawn up, breath shallow. The screen flickered, and then there they were, my mom and Eleanor. Young, vibrant, sitting on a blanket under string lights in what looked like the attic. They were laughing, holding hands, whispering to each other between smiles. The camera was shaky, probably set on a stack of boxes. Then the door opened suddenly. A man's voice thundered through the speakers, angry and sharp. The girls froze. The camera tipped slightly, capturing just enough, my mom's father standing there, rage in his eyes, shouting words that made my stomach knot. Disgrace. Shame. End it. The tape cut abruptly after that, the screen going black. I stared at the blank TV stunned. My mom had hidden this all her life. The attic wasn't just a place of memories, it was the site of something that shattered her world. She left Eleanor after that night, Aunt May said softly. Her parents gave her an ultimatum. And back then, people didn't have the freedom they do now. She chose survival. But it broke her. I held the locket in my palm, running my thumb over the cool silver. Inside was a tiny photo, the same Polaroid of her and Eleanor, folded to fit perfectly. A storm brewed inside me, grief, love, shock, and something else, a fierce need to know what happened to Eleanor. Do you know where she went? I asked. Aunt May shook her head. She disappeared not long after. Some said she moved west. Others said she stayed nearby, just living quietly. Your mom never spoke her name again. I glanced at the tape still spinning in the VCR. The faint were filling the silence like a heartbeat. My mom's voice from the attic echoed in my mind. Something happened up there. Now I knew the what. But not the why. Not fully. As I left Aunt May's house, the locket around my neck and the letters in my bag, I felt the weight of two lives intertwined, one lived in silence and one finally ready to speak. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd go back to the attic. I needed to listen to the second tape. The attic felt different this time. The air was cooler, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I switched on the old lamp, the light pooling over the floorboards where I'd first found the box. My hands were steady, but inside, my heart pounded with a strange mix of anticipation and fear. The second tape sat waiting, its label smudged with age. I slid it into the recorder I'd brought up, pressed play, and sat cross-legged on the floor. The screen flickered to life. This time, it wasn't laughter. It was my mom alone. Her hair was tied back, her face pale but determined. She held the camera close, her voice soft. If you're watching this, she began, it means I never found the courage to tell you the truth myself. I hurt someone I loved more than anyone. I thought I was protecting her. But I was just scared. She paused, eyes glistening. Eleanor didn't leave by choice. I pushed her away. My parents gave me no choice. And she disappeared that night. I tried to find her. For years. But she was gone. My throat tightened. Her voice carried decades of buried pain. She looked straight into the camera. Claire, if you ever find this, know that everything I did was out of love. For you. For her. I kept that attic untouched because part of me hoped, one day, you'd find what I couldn't. The tape ended there, no dramatic cut, just silence. I sat still for a long moment, absorbing her words. Then, faintly, I noticed something behind the panel where the box had been. A small envelope taped inside the wall. I peeled it away carefully. Inside was a single slip of paper with an address scribbled in my mom's handwriting. Underneath it, 2 words, for Eleanor. My heart raced. She'd kept searching. Even after giving up everything. The mystery wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about finishing what my mom started. The address led me to a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where time moved slower, where every house held decades of stories behind faded shutters. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I parked in front of a small white house with a wraparound porch. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the door. My mom's handwriting flashed in my mind, the words for Eleanor, heavy on my chest. I finally gathered the courage, stepped out, and walked up the creaking steps. An older woman opened the door. Her hair was streaked with silver, her eyes sharp but kind. The moment our eyes met, something clicked, a strange, quiet recognition neither of us could explain. "Hi," I began softly. "Are you Eleanor?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. Who are you?" I swallowed hard. "I'm Claire. Margaret's daughter." Her breath caught. She leaned against the doorframe, her hand trembling slightly. "Margaret," she whispered, as if saying the name pulled her back through time. I never thought I'd see a piece of her again. We sat on the porch, and I told her everything: the attic, the tapes, the letters, the locket. She listened without interrupting, her eyes misting over as memories resurfaced. "I loved her," she said finally, her voice breaking. And when she pushed me away, it shattered me. I left because I couldn't stay where everything reminded me of her. I handed her the locket. Her fingers closed around it like it was something sacred. She opened it, saw the tiny photo, and let out a soft, aching laugh. "She kept it all," I said. "All these years." Tears rolled down Eleanor's cheeks. "She never stopped loving me," she whispered. We sat in silence, 2 lives connected by a love story buried for decades, but never forgotten. Before I left, Eleanor handed me a letter she'd kept all this time. She wrote this, but never sent it. "It's yours now." Driving home, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and pink. For the first time, the attic didn't feel like a place of secrets. It felt like closure for her, for Eleanor, and for me.